Well, good morning. Welcome to the final day of Dreamforce. Thank you so much for attending. I know it's early. How many people went out last night? I know I did. All right, well, today we are going to talk about how you can spice up your apps with logic and custom UI. This is part of the admin to app builder session. All right, there we go. My name is Sethi Hillier, and I work at Salesforce, and I've been working at Salesforce for about 3 years now. And I spend a lot of my time with our partners and our developers, and I help them understand our platform so that they can build commercial applications on our platform or businesses around them so they can help consult our customers. And so my goal today is to help you understand some of the lessons learned, and hopefully you can apply them back in your business. Did you know Salesforce is a publicly traded company, and this is our safe harbor statement. I'll let you review it when you have time at salesforce.com/investor. So just so that we're all, does this thing work? Oh, here we go. So I just want to make sure that we all kind of walk away with some goals here. And for me, I want to make sure that you understand that there's a lot that you can do with Force.com out of the box without having to program and write code. There's a lot of powerful features. In fact, there's a lot of times I actually work with customers and developers and partners who are new to our platform, and they hear about things like Apex and Visualforce, and they're amazed, and instantly they just start having at it and kind of coding away, and they don't realize that they could probably leverage, a validation rule to do what that trigger is doing, or to do something else. And so I really want to just kind of outline a lot of what you can do with clicks in this presentation. So that a lot of this presentation is going to walk through those things that you can do with clicks and very little code, and show how easy and fast you can get up to speed. I mean, we're going to build an application together today and highlight some of these things. And then I want to talk about the new workbook, because we're going to be leveraging that. Has anyone here today gone through the new workbook? A few of you have. That's this guy right here. If you haven't, it's available in the developer zone. Plus, it comes with these great cheat sheets. I don't know if you guys remember in college these kind of one-pagers that talk about how to do Java or figure out your periodic tables. So anyways, we have that for Apex Visualforce. It's actually really helpful instead of having to always jump to the website. Okay, I may have to stick with that. All right, so let's start by, in terms of our agenda, we're going to go through an overview, and then we're just going to jump into it. I want to build an application with you guys, and I want to show you what we're talking about and what you can start leveraging in terms of these clicks. And then in terms of next steps, what are some resources you can leverage, and then we'll open up for questions. So just a level set here, we're going to make sure that everyone just, again, understands, like, with the real-time cloud and what you've seen at the keynote and what Marcus talked about, the idea here is that you are building apps on our platform, and you're leveraging the same things that Salesforce uses. This is the same infrastructure and the same platform that we use to build our Sales Cloud, our Service Cloud, all of the Chatter platform. All of this stuff now is available to all of you, all of our customers and developers to leverage as well. So, we're not doing anything different that you guys don't have access to. We're just using the same tools because we've invested on these tools for the last 10 years, and as they've matured, it's just become pretty obvious that, hey, why should we be the only ones leveraging workflow? Why should we be the only ones using approval processing? Why don't we give our partners and our developers and our customers access to that so they can also leverage it too? I heard a statistic yesterday, I think, about over 135,000 apps have been built today on our platform. And that's truly because it's very simple and it's very easy. And a lot of it we can do for you, and the things that we can't, you can just easily kind of point and click away or add some custom logic. And so the platform is truly, that middle layer is truly the piece that we'll be talking about today, because that's the building blocks. I mean, that is kind of like your environment in the cloud to allow you to kind of make this application work. And what we're going to focus on today, I'm just going to stick with these guys. Sorry, guys. That's just not working for me. Are these three areas. I want to talk about how you can customize our relational database in the cloud. I want to talk about how you can leverage our UI, our programmable UI in the cloud, and then our workflow, our logic, and some of these other things you can do declaratively. So we are going to build an application, and it's going to be a warehouse management application. And our goal is to build something that can allow us to track inventory, do some order processing, some basic order processing, and some invoicing. So before we begin, let's just kind of see a finished version. So this is what we're going to aim to shoot for here. So let me hop over and log into my org. All right. And this is a free developer edition that all of you guys are always able to get from our developer.force.com site. But here you can see I've created a new app called Warehouse. And it's got some custom objects here on merchandise. And merchandise is essentially like my products. These are the things that I sell. So my gadgets and widgets and whatnot. And I have some custom fields that I've created. And on these particular merchandise items, I've created a many-to-many relationship with my invoices. So I can have some line items, and in these invoices I can see what was the items that I was selling. And so here you can see I created an invoice, and in this invoice I was selling 5 of these widgets at this price. And so that when this invoice is finalized, I can send it to my customer and say, hey, this is the invoice, and these are the items that we're going to be sending to you. And at the same time, it's also made sure my merchandise is properly updated, so I know like now what's my latest inventory. And I can also do things like if I have an invoice past a certain amount and I need to get approval, I've implemented approval processing, so I can route that to my manager and make sure that that approval gets justified right on time. And also look for my warehousing people, if they want to go through the warehouse and make sure they update the inventory, we've created a custom page for them so they can kind of just walk around and easily see what are the items and what's the latest count, and update those items in this page and be able to now have that committed to the database. So it's a simple application, but again, the whole point here is that a lot of these things that I'll be showing you are things that you can leverage in your application or in whatever you want to build on Force.com. And so we're going to build this from scratch. I've done a few things to kind of speed up the process just because I only have an hour, but for the most part, a lot of the fun stuff we're going to do together. So to get started, we're going to first define our data model, and we're going to do that by using our relational-based engine that we have in the cloud. And this is something that I'm sure a lot of you have done. How many people here have created a custom object before? Okay, great. So this isn't something that I'm going to spend too much time on just because I knew a lot of you have already done it. But again, you have that ability to create those custom objects and fields and essentially create any data model that works for your business or your application. And so for us, this is essentially just kind of making sure that you understand how the lingo terms, like our custom objects, are kind of like database tables that you would see in other languages like SQL, but they're more, because when you create a custom object in Force.com, there's a lot that you get out of the box. If you didn't know, like you get API access instantly, you get reporting, you get activity tracking, you get field tracking, so you can know those what values have been changed for auditing and compliance. Very powerful. Fields are kind of like those columns, and the relationships are like that foreign key that tie those two objects together. So for us, this was our ERD, entity relationship diagram, and basically we wanted to create a many-to-many. So again, allowing you to create invoices that have many products associated to it, and a product can be tied to many invoices. And so what we're going to do in our org is we're going to create those 3 objects, which I've already done, but we're going to build those relationships together. And so let me go over here and just going to log into a new org, and this one's kind of more vanilla, where I haven't done too much stuff. And okay, so I already kind of started the process of creating the custom app and creating some of these objects. And so if you go into setup, and again, that's very easy. How many people have ever created a custom app? So okay, if you haven't, all you have to do is just go to create, and you just follow this wizard. And so I had already created one called Warehouse, and I put in some of these objects that I created earlier. So here are my list of custom objects I created. And again, I said that the way that this is going to work is going to be a many-to-many. And so there's many invoices, many merchandise, and line items that linking bridge. So the way we do that is we create these relationships. And one of the features that came out, I think maybe a year ago, was the ability to have an object that could have 2 master relationships, allowing you to have that many-to-many. And so that's what I'm just going to do right now. I'm going to make sure this line item has 2 masters, one going to merchandise and the other one going to the invoice. And so I'll just follow the wizard and accept the defaults and allow it to do this. Now the reason I'm using a master relationship versus a lookup relationship is because you get a lot with a master relationship. I have records that exist, so let me just delete that record. Not a problem. And try that one more time. Because with master detail relationships, you have that referential integrity. So if I was to delete the master, all the children would get deleted automatically. And I would also be able to do things like roll-up summary fields, which we'll show you a little bit later. So let me just quickly add that master. And accept that. And then I'm going to create, why is this not letting me create that? A lookup relationship. It's already there. Where? Okay. Gotta love live demos. Okay. What? Third time is the charm. What has happened here? Extra credit for anyone who could tell me what do you think is going on. It's saying that there's no data in this org. All the objects have no data. There was data, but I deleted it all. What was that? But I've never had any relationships in this guy. Well, that's why there's always backups. Okay, I'll just kind of walk you through what I did earlier in this other org. Okay, so in this one I called it actually invoice item, but the same idea applies. Here I created my two masters, and as a result of these masters, it allows me to have that many-to-many relationship. So whether I'm in my invoice or in my merchandise, I can see what are the items that I've created and what are the merchandise that they're tied to. So that's essentially the idea. And again, with master detail relationships, I have all of those fun things like roll-up summary fields and referential integrity that I'll show you a little bit later. Okay, so then once you've created your data model, you're going to want to focus on your UI. And you can do that in a variety of ways with Force.com. Like I said, with Force.com, we try to make things very easy for you by doing things for you automatically. So when you create an object, for instance, we generate a lot of page layouts and buttons and UI for you, so you can just get on your way and very quickly. So when I created those objects, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this, when you create your objects, you don't have to sit there and create those forms. They're already done for you. But if you want to manipulate them, you can. And then if you want something more advanced, you have Visualforce. So in terms of our two technologies, there's our page layout editor that allows you to kind of have this what you see, what you get type of experience where you can see our layouts that are created automatically, and you can drag and drop and move things around and make the UI kind of more suited to your needs. And then in terms of Visualforce, this is where we're giving you pixel level control, allowing you to basically take any type of HTML web technology, JavaScript, CSS, and essentially run that on our servers, giving you the ability to create any UI. So as you can see here, two different UIs, both running on Force.com. It's really what works for you. And I mean, one of the things that I always recommend when you're building apps too is sometimes it's also better to just create like a hybrid approach. That way, when your customers are using the application, they can still manipulate the page layout, but you can still enhance it by adding those Visualforce components somewhere in the page. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And so for the example, I just wanted to quickly show you how you could easily change the layout. One thing that I was realizing with some people that I don't think that you guys may know is if you go to any record and you wanted to edit this page, before you had to go to setup and then go to the page and then click on the page layout and then click edit. Now there's this really neat link here called edit layout, and it actually just jumps you straight there. Did anyone know that? Okay, good. Some people didn't know that. So anyways, very easy. you could just go ahead and say, okay, well, maybe I want to put the, create a new section. So I'll create a new section here and call it, you know, invoice details. Select OK. And in this, I can say maybe I want to put the description and the value and maybe the approval status. And maybe I decide that I don't want activity history and open activities, but instead I want to add notes and attachments so I can see my receipts. And save that. Takes me right back to the actual page I was viewing before, and I can see in real time some of these changes I made. So that's very easy with the page layout editor. And then a little bit later, I'll show you what you can do with Visualforce. Now let's talk about logic. And so, I mean, you have your data model. So you know how your data is going to be stored. You've started working on your UI, so you've given your users an ability to kind of interact with that data model. Now let's talk about what you can do with some logic to make your application more sophisticated. And so we give you a variety of different things you can do. You can do declarative type of logic, where it's point and click. Or you can make it more advanced using our Apex code, or you can use some of our engines, like our workflow engines and approval process, to kind of automate some of these processes. So in terms of Force.com logic technologies, we have this declarative point and click, and these features include things like making fields required. You know, I mean, that type of logic is very easy. One checkbox and you have it. Or again, when you create an object in Force.com, you can instantly give it the ability to track some of those fields so you can know what has changed, giving you that auditing compliance. Using master detail relationships, you can have roll-up fields, which I'll show you a little bit later. In betas, lookup filters. So when you create a lookup, right now when you create a lookup, it just kind of shows you all the records. But imagine being able to give your users the ability to look up but filter that set of data that shows in the lookup based on, you know, something that you know your users want. Very powerful functionality, and you don't have to code. You just tell us, you know, what are the criteria that you want to filter on, and you have that lookup experience. Workflow and approval processing, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Again, something very powerful. You don't need to develop. It's already in the platform. And again, one of the things that I think is great that people also sometimes forget about using these declarative and these point-and-click types of technology is when you use this, you don't have to write Apex test methods. And that's a great thing sometimes for a lot of people who write a lot of code, because every time you want to deploy that code, you need to make sure you have a certain amount of code coverage. Using these, you don't have to worry about that. Formula-based logic, if any of you ever used Excel and you write in a formula, same type of idea. Let that formula run on our platform so we can do some type of calculation, data validation rules, and whatnot. So again, for this presentation, the scope is to focus primarily on the declarative and the Force.com logic. If you want to obviously add more sophisticated logic, you do have the things like the Apex triggers and classes that you can obviously leverage and make your application even more complex. So driving into these data validation rules and lookup filters, they essentially are there so you can enforce and ensure business continuity inside your data and quality inside of what your users are doing. Roll-up summary fields allow you to aggregate data on those childs, and there's different functions that you can leverage. Sum, max, count, which I'll show you. Formula fields, using these formulas, you can do some complex calculations. You can have images displayed, hyperlinks to different types of things. Workflow and approvals, again, you can kind of automate some things that your customers would normally have to do manually, and you can have certain events fired. And these can be event-based, or these can be time-based. And these can be things like having tasks created, updating fields, maybe doing outbound messaging. So, you know, for us, in our example, if, for instance, when an inventory reaches a low point, it can automate a task which could send out an outbound message to our supplying system that knows when to start ordering new inventory. I mean, that type of logic can be easily added through some of the point-and-click functions of workflow. And so in this next example, we're going to do three things. You know, we've been told that we want to make sure that when you're creating a line item, you want it to automatically calculate what is the value based on the quantity and price. And then we want to roll up all of those totals to the invoice itself, so we have kind of a grand total. And then we want to automate the inventory checks to make sure that when we are adding items to the invoice, that we're not going over our inventory amounts. And so, unfortunately, I wanted to show you kind of creating those from scratch, but because the other org was playing with me, I'm just going to show you what I've done, and then we can kind of walk through it. So the first thing that I did is on that invoice line item, I created a field called value, and this is just a formula field. And it's very easy to create. Once I went through the wizard, I just picked up type currency. But you can see here, when you use the formula fields, you can just say, okay, well, what are the fields that you want to drop in? And so it was the two fields that I already had on the invoice, which were the price and the quantity. And so basically the value is just a multiplication of the two. So nothing too complicated, but because of that, it's going to save me a lot of time and be able to display that data. So now that I have a value for each of those line items, I want to roll that up to the invoice statement because that's the master. And so if I go back to my list of objects, there's the invoice statement. I created a new field, and this field was called invoice value. And this was a roll-up summary field, and basically what I did is I told it to do a sum of what field, and it was that formula field that I created, the value. And so basically it will calculate that for me automatically. And you saw there's different other options you can do when you're doing the roll-up. And then finally, I wanted to make sure that when I create a line item and when I actually put in the quantity, that I'm not doing a quantity that's over the actual inventory count. And so in the invoice lie down himself, I created a validation rule. And this validation rule is just called order in stock. And basically, I'm doing a check. And so there's a few checks happening. First thing is I want to check to see if this is a new line item I'm creating or if I'm editing an existing one. And so I do an if statement to check if it is new. Okay, then I just want to do this quick check and say, all right, is the number of items that I'm planning to sell, is that greater than the amount of inventory I have in my merchandise? And again, I'm able to do this because of that relationship I built. Now, let's say it's not a new record. Let's say I'm editing an existing record. So I'm changing my quantity from 10 items sold to 5 or to 15. Well, then it's going to run through this if statement. And it's basically going to see, well, if you're just decreasing the number of items that you're selling, so if I was going to sell 10 but now I'm selling 5, you don't need to do anything. Just do that check and just false and jump out of the loop because you're decreasing, so obviously you're not going to run out of stock. Otherwise, find out what that new amount is by doing a comparison to the prior value, and then go ahead and check that against the total inventory. And then we'll end out of there. So we're kind of checking 3 different scenarios. If it's new, and if it's not new, did it go up or did it go down? And if it went up, are you still kind of in your area? Does that make sense? So then if that has happened, if ever time that it's actually over the limit, we'll just put this message here, and we actually put it next to the field. You can put it at the top of the page, whatever you want. So let's go ahead and see how those all worked. So again, I can go to my invoice statement. I can take an invoice that I created here, and if I take a look at one of these guys, I can see here that I had this new field called value, and it was just a multiplication of these two. And then on the invoice, I had multiple invoices here, all different certain amounts, and so basically what it did is it took this roll up, and so I probably have a lot of items, that's why I have so much here. And then in terms of the inventory check, let's see here. So this one is tied to the widget, and the widget is 15,000. So if I was to go back to this guy, and if I was to edit this and change this from 3,000 to 1501, and save that, I will get, hello? There you go. You'll go ahead and get an error like that. So that's the idea. And again, all of that with no code, and you're able to add this type of logic very easily. All right. How are you guys doing so far? Okay. So now I want to talk about workflow and automation. And again, with Force.com, it's very easy to add this workflow. And usually businesses add workflow because of 3 reasons. You want to automate something. You find your users are doing the same task over and over again, so you want to save them time, make them more productive. You want to enforce something. You know something always needs to be this certain type of value, and you want to ensure that it's that value, and you want to make sure maybe for compliance reasons that it can't be changed. And then you want to make sure that you can be adaptable. I mean, your business is probably all constantly changing. Your requirements are changing. Your needs are changing. And so you want a workflow engine that can adjust and change with your needs. And so with Force.com, we really try to make sure all three of those things were top of mind when we were doing our workflow engine. And the way we were able to do that is by keeping it simple. Salesforce has this mantra where we always want to make simple things simple and make hard things, keep them possible. And so we have a very simple to follow, UI, all point and click again, and you can have these rules executed based on some sort of formula or maybe some criteria, and then these actions can be fired based on an event or based on a trigger. And again, there's different actions that you see here, the alerts, the tasks, the work, the updates. With the updates, if you have that master detail relationship, you can also do cross-object updates, and then the outbound messaging via web services. And so in the example, we wanted to do two things. We wanted to make sure when we create the invoice, we're grabbing the price from the merchandise. There really should be no reason that the user has to type in the price, and we want to make sure that they also are using the price that's in the system and enforce that. And then the other thing that we wanted to make sure is that when we're actually creating these items and we actually fulfill the order, that it's going to update the inventory amount so that we know what's the latest amount that we can work with. And so here, inside the sky, we created two different workflow rules. And so under workflow, the first rule was to make sure the price was updated. And so in this workflow rule, I have it evaluating to true, and I make it so that every time the record is created, it evaluates to true, so we'll know that this will fire. And once it evaluates to true, I have it do a field update instantly. And so this one is event-based versus time. And in this, all I'm doing is I'm just assigning the unit price field. I'm updating that unit price field to this formula, which is passing the value from the merchandise object, since there is that relationship there. So very, very simple. And then in terms of the other guy, I want to update the inventory. And so in that field update rule, I go ahead and I just want to check to make sure that the statement is in a pending state. And if it is in a pending state, every time the record is created or edited, I want to update the inventory based on those values. And so the rule that I do is a cross-object rule where I'm updating the merchandise item even though the rule itself is on the invoice item. Even though the rule is on the line item itself, I'm actually updating the merchandise, the master. And so, again, if the record is new, I'm just going to go ahead and find out what the grand total inventory was, and I'm going to reduce it by the units that I put in. But if the record is not new, if I'm updating an existing record, I'm going to take the grand total and I'm going to reduce it by what was the unit sold minus the prior value. So that in that case, if I end up changing my value, I might end up incrementing my inventory or I might decrement it. So based on this logic, it will do either. So the way this works now is go in inventory. Let's see, what merchandise do I have here? So this gadget has 10,000 items. So let's say I create a new invoice. So we're going to say it's line item 1. And the reason that I have the price field here is because I'm a system administrator. But if I was to be a read-only user, or if I was another type of user, I've made this field read-only, so they wouldn't even see it, and I could maybe take it off the layout. But I'm just going to leave it blank for now. And let's say that I'm going to sell 1,000 of these items. And I'll go ahead and attach it to one of these invoices and click Save. So a couple things should happen. One, it pulled in that price for me automatically from my gadget. So this price came from my gadget, from the merchandise, and then it did the calculation for me. So then if I go back to the gadget, I can see there's the price, and then because I sold 1,000, it took from 10,000 to 9,000. So again, allowing me to easily add some pretty cool logic, as well as enforcing some rules, as well as updating some values in different objects. Very powerful stuff when you put it and apply it to your application. Next thing that I want to talk about is approval processing. And so same idea applies a lot with approval processing and workflow. You can now essentially just make sure that when you want to have your specific data go through a series of steps and make sure it's run by a certain number of users, you can do that very easily with our Force.com approvals. Again, the whole UI is point and click. You can have it go through automated through your manager automatically, or follow a hierarchy, or you can make it go through parallel approvers, and then you can have those parallel approvers maybe do something where only one person needs to approve to make it move forward, or you need to get like a unanimous approval. And then from there, you can even add Apex if you want to dynamically have it routed to certain people based on code. And then you give the ability to the approver to approve through the app or via email through like their BlackBerry or whatnot. And then the actions are the same. You have the actions of updating a field, doing a task, outbound message, email alert. And so in this example, we're going to say that we want to set up some auto approval. And then we want to route it to a manager if it gets above a certain amount. And so the way we did that is back in the app, we went over to setup and we went over to approval process. And I created approval process on the inventory item, and the invoice statement, and called it large invoice value. And if you take a look at it, basically what I did was I started by saying that, okay, I want every invoice to go through here because I want to submit all of them. But the ones that are under a certain amount, I want them auto-approved. And the other ones that are over a certain amount, I want them to go to my manager. So everything gets entered in here. If it does go to my, if it does need approval, I just route it to my manager. So whoever is my manager on the user record, that will go straight to. And I want to send an email to that person saying, hey, this record needs to be approved. So I created an email earlier, and I'm leveraging certain merge fields so the data is relevant. And you can go ahead and customize what the actual page is going to look like. So if they are in the app and they decide to approve it, you can determine how that page will look to them. And then you're deciding who you want to allow to actually submit. And so for here, I'm just saying the person who created the invoice can submit. And they click Save. And then here I have some different things I can do. First thing is I wanted to make sure that, as I said, that it's part of the initial step process. It's going to come in, and if it's less than $2,000 in terms of the invoice, then I want it to just approve automatically. If it's greater than $2,000, then I want it to go to my manager. And so that's what it's doing. And remember when I talked about different things in terms of who can approve? Well, I can easily, if I wanted to, assign it to a queue and have like a number of users approve it, or I could maybe assign it to specific people, and I could add multiple people that I wanted to say, oh, I need to have these people, and I can make it the first person to approve or reject, or I can make it unanimous. So a lot of different options when you're setting this up. So we'll just have to go to the manager and save. And then I just created a few actions. So as soon as you start the approval process, well, I wanted to lock the record, and I wanted to set one of the status fields to a pending state. And then if it was approved, I wanted to set the status to an approved state. If it was rejected, I wanted to reopen it. How many people here have seen the Workflow Analyzer? So this is a great tool. Sometimes when you're reading through all the things that I just showed, it's kind of hard to conceptually visualize how is this all going to work out. So now there's a Workflow Analyzer. All you have to do is just push this button here, View Diagram, and it shows this guy here, and you can see kind of what is, at a high level, this approval processing doing. Again, when it enters, it will lock the record, and at that point, it will also set the status to a pending state. And then once it enters that first step, it's going to go ahead and find, okay, well, is it greater than 2,000? No, it's not. Automatically approved. Yes, it is. Okay, go ahead and send it to the manager. And then if he does approve it. Otherwise, reject it and set the status. So this is a great way for you to get an idea of what your approval process is going to do. You can print it out if you want to share it with others. You can't manipulate the approval processing through the screen. It's only read-only. But we're always recommending to get your feedback, and so you can always let us know. I know that is something that's planned. So let's now see it all work. And then the last thing is that I did also do something where I enabled it to do email response. So as long as I go into settings and enable this, I can respond to this via email or through the app. So back in the invoice statement, I have my invoice here. And let's go ahead and just create a new one. So it's open, my invoice. And I'm going to go ahead and add a line item. One is sold 10, and try to keep it low. And I sold the gadgets and save that. So that should be pretty low. Okay, so it's under 2,000. So if I hit submit for approval, it should go ahead and auto approve, which it does, because it's under 2,000. Now, if I was to edit this record, actually, let me first change it back to open. And if I was to edit this guy and say I was actually selling 1,000, it should put me over. Now, if I was to submit for approval, it's going to send it over to my boss, Bob Johnson. Bob in Hawaii is just going now and receiving his email. Once Yahoo lets me. Obviously not built on force.com. Let's see. Let me just sign out and log back in again. Maybe that helps. Yahoo. Still no email yet. But essentially, I had one from earlier. I would get an email saying, hey, this is the email. Do you want to approve it? And then if I reply and say approved and put some new line saying, great job, and hit send. Oh, here it is. Oh, that was sent to me. It won't show up in this one, but I know on another one, it would have had, who he approved, and based on his comment, it would have showed right there. So again, making it very easy for your managers to interact with the application from anywhere. So that's approval processing and workflow. And as you saw, no code, no magic, just all point and click. Okay, now I want to talk about Visualforce. So this is probably the only section here where we have to talk about code, but essentially, again, Visualforce is that powerful capability allowing you to manipulate the page and really give you the ability to say, okay, I want this page to do whatever I want it to do, and I want to maybe have it have some complex wizard process I want to guide someone through, or maybe I want to have multiple actions, or I want to display multiple areas of data on one page. You can do that very easily with Visualforce, and because it's all web technologies, if you know HTML, if you know JavaScript, CSS, you can easily incorporate that. And so I had already created a page. But we'll just go ahead and create it again, just to show you. So if you ever create a Visualforce page, you have two options. You can either just go to Setup and go to under Setup, under Develop, Pages. You can create them new here. But I always like to create them the other way, which is you just go ahead and after the .com/ just type in the word Apex and then type in your page. So let's call this like inventory. And it's going to look for that page. Since I don't have a page called inventory, it's going to ask me if I want to create it. So I'll create it. Okay, and so now I'm going to just kind of build this page from scratch for you guys. And every time you've ever created a Visualforce page, you're going to see like this standard congratulations, this is your new page. Has anyone here created a Visualforce page? Okay, so a few of you. Cool, so we'll kind of walk through this together. So once you create it, again, the value I like about creating the page in this view is you have the page editor here, so I can make the change, save it, and just like that, you can see that page right there. So it gives you the ability to kind of see what you're doing and if something doesn't make sense. So in this page, we want to do a couple things. First, we want to kind of change the look and feel. So we're going to remove the standard style sheet of Salesforce. So we're going to put in here standard style sheet, set that to false, and we want to also remove the header and set that to false. And as soon as I do that, clean slate. So now we can go ahead and go at it. We're like Picasso. So first thing we want to do is let's put it a title. Again, like I said, this is all standard web technology. You don't need to spend a lot of time relearning web technology, so I can just use normal HTML tags. Call this my inventory count sheet. Close that tag. Save that, and you can see our title. Okay. Then what I want to do is I actually, and this is always my little shortcut to get back, I actually created a style sheet earlier, and I uploaded it as a static resource, and it's called styles. And so in this styles is a lot of my CSS and my styling, and so I want to leverage this, and so I'm going to call it. And so back over here, apex/inventory. I'm going to now reference that style sheet. Okay, so we are going to create a new tag called apex style sheet. And it's always nice as you start typing out, it kind of helps you speed things up here. Value is, all right, URL for, and we're going to pass it that resource, that style sheet that I had uploaded. Resource.styles, and then we're going to pass the name. And so the file, I just named it styles.css. And that, and end that, and end that with my guy. Okay. So, save that. See, now this kind of style sheet's been applied. You'll see more of it as I actually add more. Okay, so now that I've done that, I want to leverage a standard controller. So there's two types of controllers you can have with Visualforce Page. You can have standard controllers or custom controllers. Custom controllers are Apex code that you would build. Standard controllers are just a standard functionality that you get, with Salesforce. So like if you were to save, it would just use that standard save, or the look and feel would look like that particular object. And so for this, since we're doing inventory, we want the standard controller for the merchandise object, __C. And so I typically here, if I was to save this, you would actually see maybe the tab change, and it would look like the merchandise color. But obviously, since I removed it, you don't see that. But the whole idea now is it's interacting with that object. So any saves I do, it's going to save to that particular object. And the other thing is I want to deal with some data. I want some data to deal with. And so I'm going to pass in record set var, and I'm just going to give it a name. And basically, this is going to list all of the records I currently have so I can do some stuff with it. Products, we'll call it. Okay, save that. Okay, so now we want to create a table. And the whole goal is to create a table of all of our products. And we want to be able to just say, all right, these are all my products. This is the inventory count. Let me change it and click save, and then easily save it because it's for our warehouse people. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to first starting by creating an Apex form. And then in that form, we are going to create a data table. Apex data table. Okay, and in that data table, it's going to connect to those values which are coming from that record set var. So we're going to reference that. Close that guy. And then just so we can reference the fields that are tied to this particular list of data, I'm just going to put a very short variable that I can use, call it P. And so when I reference any of those fields in the merchandise, it will come from that list of data. Okay, so now, and then we want to be able to give it like the way that the classes display and the way that the CS will display. We're going to use this row classes here that allows us to separate how the look and feel will be presented, and you'll see that. Odds and evens. Okay. And so now we have this data table. Now we want to put columns in the table, and each column will be tied to one of these fields. And so the way we're going to do that is we're just going to put in the apex column. And before I forget, I just want to let you know that everything I'm doing, if you ever get stuck on this guy, if you click this component reference, it pops up this very helpful help guide that actually walks you through all the different Visualforce components I'm leveraging. And if you click on some of these guys, they always usually have some like usage that tells you how to use them. So very helpful, especially for those who are new. Okay, so apex column. And in this column, we're going to give it a header value, so it actually has like a title on the top of the column. And we'll just call this one products. And then we're going to actually pass in the value itself. And so again, using the reference that I created earlier, P, and then we'll just call in the name of that field. And so the name field is usually just a standard name field. And then we are going to do this we're going to do this 2 more times. So I'm just going to copy this to save time. Okay, but for this one, we want to actually not just show the name, we want to show it the inventory count. So we'll change the title and call it inventory. And we'll reference that field. And so it was total underscore inventory underscore C. This is one of those custom fields to that merchandise object. And then I want to also have an input field so I can change it in this page. And so this one is going to be, like the physical inventory. And it's going to be tied to the same field as above, but it's going to be an input field. And the way I do that is instead of having the value here, and I'm actually not going to close that tag too, I'm going to put in an apex input field. And that value for the field is going to be the same as above. And then I want to close that column, that last column. Okay, let me make sure this looks right. So now we have, with our CSS styling, our products page. And again, as I highlight over this, it's also got this kind of odds and evens kind of look and feel that you see here. And this is displaying our products, this is displaying our inventory, and then this is our input field so we can edit it. So now once we edit it, we're going to obviously want to be able to commit that change to the database, and the way we're going to do that is by adding a button. So inside the form, we are just going to create apex command button, and we're going to give it an action. And the action that we're going to tie to, again, because we're using the standard controller, there's a lot of standard actions you get: edit, save, quick save, things like that. So we're just going to reference one of these actions. And this one's going to be the quick save action, so it doesn't take us to a new page afterwards. And then we're just going to give the button a value, and we'll call it update count. And save that. Actually, I want to put a space here too. Just for a new line. There we go. So these are all my current counts. If I wanted to, kind of like as I showed earlier, I can change this to maybe from 15,000 to 10,000, update that. Using the quick save, it's done very easily. Does that make sense? It's cool, huh? And it's very easy to do. And I mean, look at this. This was 15 lines of code. And a lot of it is all documented, so as you get more experience with Visualforce, you could easily make these pages a lot more complex. It's really the sky's the limit. The last thing I want to show you, which is kind of like an extra freebie, is now let's imagine, for instance, that these warehouse guys are in the warehouse, but they're not carrying their laptops. They're carrying like a mobile device. They probably have like some Motorola device or some wireless PDA, and they want to see this Visualforce page, and they want to be able to just look around and change the inventory right there and hit save. And so you can do that very easy with Force.com, because a lot of the stuff that you build on our platform can be mobilized instantly. And so I want to just quickly show you how you would do that. And so what I would do is I would maybe create a new tab, and I would call it, tie it to that page. So we'll tie it to our inventory page here, and it can be like mobile inventory. Give it a nice look and feel. And then check that, mobile ready. And making that check actually now tells the platform that this page can be accessed mobily. And so then once I finish that and click save, all you have to do is configure it. And you can test this out really easily, because your developer edition actually has 2 mobile licenses that you can play around with. And so the way it would work is, in your mobile configuration, you would create a new mobile configuration. Let's call it like, mobile guys. Make it active. Maybe you want to say, okay, all the mobile guys are the people who are in the solution manager profile. So only these guys have access to this. And inside this, they can go ahead and say, well, what tabs do you want to mobilize? Well, I want to mobilize that new tab I created called Mobile Inventory. And so now, once they log into Salesforce using Salesforce Mobile on their application, on their device, they will see this new tab called Mobile Inventory. And they hit it, and it's going to load, and that Visualforce page will render right on their device, and they can just go ahead and click away. Really cool, huh? I think that's actually really cool, I think. Because, again, if you wanted to build this from scratch on one of those mobile devices and have to call like the web services, you could do it, but this what took 48 minutes. Okay, so we finished that. And just to recap, we did quite a bit today. I'm proud of us. Good job. Give yourself a round of applause. We built our warehouse app. We added inventory tracking, order process invoicing, and we even added that mobile support at the very end, just to show how easy it is. And any of those objects you could also make mobile. So if someone wants to just quickly also be on the fly, or like imagine your sales guys want to be able to see what's the status of that invoice. I know I submitted it, but has my boss actually approved it yet? He doesn't need to go back into Salesforce and log in. He can log in through his mobile phone, because he just needs to expose those objects, just the same way I did with the tab. So in terms of takeaways, again, this session isn't about trying to make it very difficult by coding. It's all about showing you how easy it is to do a lot of things with our platform. And you can do that through clicks and very little code. And again, I think it's very valuable that you know these things, because as a developer, someone new to our platform, you may just jump straight into the code and realize, wait, there's some things that I can leverage that are already there for me that are going to save me time. Formula fields, validation rules, all that stuff you can play around with. The WYSIWYG editor makes it very easy for anyone to make changes, you as well as your customers after you deploy them. And anything you ever want to enhance, you can do very easily with the Visualforce. So in terms of next steps, this presentation is recorded. If there's anything that you missed or you want to go over again, you'll be able to see that on developer.force.com/streamforce. Everything that I did today was in the workbook. So if you yourself want to build a warehouse app or get started with one, get this, and you can go through everything I did, plus kind of read more about some of the things that I didn't get to talk about. Plus, it goes into things like, okay, now let's start adding Apex, or let's start making a website around this. Imagine now I have this inventory application that has all my products. Imagine building a product page around it, and then my customers can go to my website, buy this product, and as soon as they buy it, it's already doing some of these validation rules to update the processing, update the inventory count, and start the invoice, things like that. So very, very valuable. If you want to start developing applications and deploying them for free, we have a free Force.com edition that gives you 100 users. If you already have Salesforce, you can also just add those 100 users to your existing account. And give us feedback. I really appreciate your guys' time. I'm sorry about those hiccups at the beginning, but hopefully I was able to still kind of give you an understanding of how this all works without showing you step by step. Is that, yes. Oh, thanks. All right, so yeah, if I was to clone a record, all that logic would also run. And that actually is a good point. I'll hold it, thanks. You know, when I created a record and I hit save, it started running those validation rules and those triggers. If I was to clone it and hit save, it's going to run it again. If I was to use the data loader and upload a bunch of data, those rules are all going to run as well. If I was to use the API or anything, or again, coming through sites, once you write that run rule, whether you come through the web, whether you come through your mobile device, all of those rules will always be executed. And on delete, too. Go ahead. Yeah. Well, the parameter gives you just that whole look and feel about being able to, like, when you highlight over it and it gives you a different look and feel. The CSS just gave you that colors. So if I didn't have the CSS, it would have kind of looked like the standard Salesforce look and feel, but you would be able to differentiate the columns. But we're using the CSS, we just kind of made it, you know, blue from like light blue. So it's a combination of the two. Go ahead. In the CSS, well, when I made that tag at the very beginning saying I want to use this standard controller and I wanted to point to this CSS, then at that point inside the CSS I had already kind of had like the class to say like these are the things that need to be updated when I highlight over it. I think inside the workbook they go into a little bit of detail on the CSS as well. It's provided for you, part of the example, so then you can kind of see what's like, you know, what's actually in that zip file that I uploaded earlier. Yeah, not a problem. Any other? Yeah, go ahead, sir. Yeah. Oh, so actually what happens is as soon as you enable that feature in here to do, hold on, let me see. When you do that feature to actually allow you to reply over email, Salesforce creates this automatic email that allows you to do email to Apex. It's a feature that we have. And so basically when our system receives an email at a very specific URL, it will go to your org and start doing some functionality. Yeah. Yeah, and so like the email when it came, which one is it? Yeah, this email right here. See, this email was automatically generated by that org, and so it knows that when you respond to this email, it's going to go to that specific org where it originated from, and then it will go ahead and complete the approval process. Does that make sense? Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. Right. So, it is in beta. I don't know if Mary Scott is still in the room. She's actually the PM, but it's okay. So beta means that, we're kind of working to making it GA, but basically right now, I think if you want to actually start using that feature, I think you need to contact support, and they will enable it into your org. And then from there, you can, whenever you create any lookup, you can, again, just define those filters and say, I only want to search for, I only want to have show up accounts that are in California, for instance. And then that list will show up based on that. So you should have it. You just need to contact Salesforce, and they'll enable it since it's in a beta state. Go ahead.
Does that search only allow you to filter on other fields in the target lookup table object, or can you look from the source object? So if I'm starting from a customer or a record where I have a customer, can I pull past that customer ID over to the search and filter contacts, say, by that customer? Or is it only searching and filtering by the object?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. After the presentation, come over to me, and I'll try to see if I can find Mary to get that answer for you. Go ahead, back there. With the approval? Oh, yeah, so it just looks for words. There's a few words you can pass. I think approve, approved, rejected, reject, no, yes, those types of words. They're all listed in the documentation, and based on those words, it will start the process. And then anything you put on the second line becomes a comment. I've never tried that. I've never tried that. I wonder. It will blow up. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. For the approval, that's out of the box. As soon as you check that checkbox, these words will be active, and it's already done for you. All of that code is already written. You don't need to worry about anything. Yeah. Go ahead. The workbook is in the Force.com dev zone. Just walk down that hall, and then to the left, you see all those computers. There's stacks of them there. Just grab one, plus you get the cheat sheets with it. Right. I think that's still on the roadmap. Yeah. Yeah. The question was saying, I created a master detail relationship, but how many levels can I create that master detail, right? And I'm trying to figure out if there is a limit. Here, let me just quickly try. But I know that's definitely come up before in the past, and I know we'll just try a quick test. So yeah, you're right. So like if I wanted to make the invoice line item a master to this test, since that already has a master, and yeah, I can't. So I think I think for now, then that's probably something that'll still have to be put on the idea exchange. I mean, it's a great idea, but I'm not exactly sure why. You know, I'd have to find out. I mean, it could be maybe something related to just the underlying platform and a limitation, but for the most part, I know we're always constantly actually enhancing our platform. There's actually a session. I'm not sure what time it is. I know it's today on like the future of our platform, and we're talking about what are some new things that we're bringing to the table. What's that? It's right after this. Oh, so stay for that because that's a great question. But I've seen that, and I could have sworn it's been added on one of our roadmaps. I mean, obviously under Safe Harbor, I can't comment like specifically or give you a definitive date, but exactly. Any other questions? Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, thank you guys for your time.